and tax rises? And if not, do they risk deterring us from voting for them?
Janet Street-Porter.
I don't think they did tell you the truth. I was listening earlier this evening to Radio 4, and there was a report on Radio 4 that said that the truth is that the actual deficit is going to cost us $30,000 per household, and if we add in all the PFI deficit, all the debt for all the hospitals and buildings and schools that Gordon Brown has gone around opening, that adds on another $5,000, which makes it £35,000 a household. And then we add in all the public sector pensions that we've still got to pay for. It actually adds up to about £90,000 per household per year that we're going to have to front. Now, none of them said that, did they?
£90,000 per household?
That's what they said on Radio 4 at between 5 and 6 tonight. Anyway, the truth of the matter is, whatever we've got to pay, it's a huge amount of money, and no one really wanted to say it because it's electoral poison. But in a way, isn't that just like treating us like children? Isn't it something your mum and dad would do when you were little? I mean, why can't they just come out with it and say, you know, we messed up and you're going to have less of this, less of that. And the other thing that I've noticed, and this isn't just to attack the last government, but I do feel that now the government, instead of just being the government running the country, has kind of taken over my life. It's become my mum, my dad, my family, my nanny. Can't they all just back off and cost us less? But they didn't really say that either.
All right. Ed Balls, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, they attacked all three parties on this. Labour has 87% of its cuts that it needs to make unspecified. Now, we don't want to go back to what you are doing. What about the bits you haven't and the other parties haven't defined? Why haven't they been defined? Why don't we know what those 87% are?
In the debates tonight, there were two different issues around spending cuts. There was the issue about this year, and then the issue that you're referring to, which is about the future years. On this year, first of all, there was a debate tonight where Gordon Brown and Nick Clegg are both agreeing that to cut billions of pounds this year would actually be very damaging, not just to jobs, but also to growth in the economy, could send us back into recession. That actually could lead to higher unemployment, more debt, more deficit, more long-term problems. So first of all, there is a very, very big choice now. And to be honest, Vince Cable and Alistair Darling have agreed on the big calls over the last couple of years. They're agreeing on this big call. To cut spending this year would be a disaster.
All right, what about the 87% in the years ahead?
Then, going further out, what the IFS said, they said some things I agree on. They said that the Conservatives would cut a lot more than us, but they also said that we should be specifying spending right out to 7-8 years' time. I don't think that's realistic. They also excluded a lot of the efficiency savings which we've already got in place, 35 billion. But importantly, what they did say was that if the Conservatives are going to reverse the national insurance rise, which is a fair tax rise, they're going to have to find the money from somewhere else. Where's the money going to come from?
You're cherry-picking. We're talking about Labour policy and the gaps in the Labour policy.
David, we're talking about the choice in the election, which was set out very clearly in the IFS report. And if you reverse the national insurance rise...
That wasn't what we were... We're not talking about the choice in the election. The question was about whether we're being told the truth by all three parties.
Well, look,
it may be a proper choice is not being presented. That's what Janet Street-Porter was saying.
Look, none of the in at this stage can tell you the details of exactly how they will make reductions in 2017, because it all depends upon what happens to growth this year, to unemployment, to what happens to the economy, which would be very bad if we cut spending now. But the choice is, do you do national insurance rise or not?
All right.
Do you protect schools and hospital spending or not?
You're narrowing it down again.
Well, I'm not. I'm actually pointing out that in the election, there are big choices.
Right.
If the country makes the wrong choice, we'll have fewer teachers, fewer police officers and higher unemployment.
Let me just repeat the question, as I had to earlier today. Have the party leaders told us the truth for the first time about spending cuts and tax rises, and if not, do they risk deterring us from voting for them? Alex Salmond.
Well, they obviously hadn't, and we've just seen a demonstration why David Dimbleby should have been allowed to ask questions tonight in the debate to get specification. It is true, Ed, that the Institute of Fiscal Studies said you hadn't specified 87% of the public spending, departmental spending cuts that are implied by the Labour Party's budget plans. I actually heard somebody from Vince's party on the radio in Scotland this morning who was claiming great credit for the fact that they only hadn't specified 74%, which was better than either Labour and the Tories. Well, I suppose arithmetically it's the case, but the same point arises. This election is like that iceberg. They're debating that small bit above the surface. What they don't want you to see is that vast, vast mountain of cuts which they're not prepared to discuss. And we've only got a week to force these parties to tell people the truth.
All right. Vince Cable, your party leader, and indeed you, claim to be more honest and straightforward with the British people than the other parties. What about this 75% unspecified? What is it that prevents you saying what everybody here suspects if you came to power or other two parties came to power you'd have to do?
Well, let me answer this point about the 74, the 84%, whatever it is.
75%.
That figure originates, we're talking there about 2 parliaments, about an 8-year period. And I mean, we're a democracy. What we can do is to give you an undertaking about what we would do in the next parliament for which we're seeking election. We can't talk about what happened in the parliament after that. And I think it's quite reasonable to hold all the 3 major parties to account and say, have you got a realistic programme for the next period on which you're being elected? And it is true that we haven't spelt out in full detail everything that needs to be happened. Absolutely right, and we haven't as much as, well, actually we've done more than the others, but we've got more to explain. The Institute of Fiscal Studies acknowledged that we'd put forward, I think, 15 billion of cuts, detailed, costed, of which 10 billion was going to reduce the deficit, but more needs to be done than that, and we acknowledge. The budget deficit is enormous. Absolutely enormous. That is the truth. I mean, it happened because of a combination of the collapse of the banking system and then the recession. And the government has taken all those costs onto its own books. And we as a country are going to have to pay that back. We're going to have to pay it down. And we're going to have to specify how it's done.
Do you just want to clear up that point about your 10 billion,
yes.
Where you appear to be saying we've got an extra 10 billion, and then when we look through your figures with precision, we see that actually 3.5 of that is taken from is a substitution for a cut that the Labour Party are already going to do.
Yes.
So you exaggerate, is it true?
No, it isn't exaggerate, but you're quite right. That bit, the 2-year pay restraint, is more or less what the Labour government have done, but we do it, we believe, in a fair way.
We agree.
It's substantially more, actually, than the Conservatives have produced in their paper.
We've got a lot of people with their hands up, and I will come to you. I think we should just hear from the Conservatives, and then we'll open it up.
One of the things, David, you didn't mention about the
82% in your case, unspecified.
The IFS report. It said in the IFS report, the point that Vince has actually sort of referred to is that they said